on small business technology and research programs before taking up the spending bill to finish out fiscal year 2011, which ends on September 30th. And now to live coverage of the U.S. Senate here on C-SPAN 2.
The Senate will come to order. The chaplain, Dr. Barry Black, will lead the Senate in prayer.
Let us pray. Almighty God, who made light to shine in darkness, shine on Capitol Hill. Restore our lawmakers to the light of your glory, as we have seen revealed in your sacred word. May they permit your sacred scriptures to provide a lamp for their feet and a light for their path, refusing to lean upon human wisdom alone. Help them to seek your guidance and to follow where you lead. Like a shepherd, guide them and our nation through the darkness and dangers of these challenging times. We glorify you, gracious God. We praise you for all your blessings. Amen.
Please join me in reciting the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Clerk will read a communication to the Senate.
Washington, D.C., April 13, 2011. To the Senate. Under the provisions of Rule 1, Paragraph 3 of the Standing Rules of the Senate, I hereby appoint the Honorable Kirsten E. Gillibrand, a senator from the State of New York, to perform the duties of the Chair. Son Daniel K. Inouye, President Pro Tempore.
Madam President.
Majority Leader.
Following any leader remarks, the Senate will be in morning business until 3 p.m. today. Senators during that period of time will be allowed to speak for up to 10 minutes. The Republicans will control the time from 11:30 a.m. until 12:30 p.m. And the majority will control the time from 1 p.m. to 2 p.m. We're working on an agreement to complete action on the small business bill. Madam President, it's been a difficult thing to do. We have a number of amendments that are pending. Some senators won't allow an agreement on those amendments unless they get their amendments. There's lots and lots of amendments. And we're trying to work our way through these. The three amendments that are at the top of the list is one offered by Senator Cornyn, one by Senator Hutchison, and one by Senator Sanders. And we just haven't been able to work through this legislative morass. We spent more than enough time on this bill. I'm going to continue working on that. We could, with time here not being so heavily used, certainly yesterday was a case in point. Everyone's looking forward to the final conclusion of this fiscal year 2011 budget. We're going to have a vote this week to complete that. So everyone is, I guess, anxious to get that done. But we need to get the small business jobs bill done. Additionally, the text of the long-term CR has been filed in the House and is available for review. We expect to receive it from the House sometime tomorrow. Of course, from my perspective, the earlier the better. So I would ask senators to come and talk about this resolution. If they have any problems that they like or dislike, they could come and talk about this bill. This would be the time to do that because we're going to really cramp for time when the bill gets here. Senators, of course, will be notified when votes are arranged. H.J. Res. 37 is the desk due for a second reading.
Clerk will read the title of the bill for the second time.
H.J. Res. 37, Joint Resolution Disapproving the Rules Submitted by the Federal Communications Commission with respect to regulating the Internet and broadband industry practices.
I would object to any further proceedings with respect to this joint resolution at this time.
The joint resolution will be placed on the calendar.
Would the chair announce morning business?
Under the previous order, the leadership time is reserved. Under the previous order, the Senate will be in a period of morning business for debate only until 3 p.m., with senators permitted to speak therein for up to 10 minutes each, with the Republicans controlling the time from 11:30 a.m. until 12:30 p.m. for the purpose of a colloquy, and the majority controlling the time from 1 p.m. to 2 p.m. Clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Akaka.
I ask consent that the quorum call be dispensed with.
Without objection.
All across the country this morning, Americans are struggling, and they're not getting much in the way of help or hope from Washington. Those who are unemployed or eager to hire are frustrated by a mountain of burdensome new rules and regulations Democrats have imposed on them in the last 2 years, and by the uncertainty that comes with every proposal to create another one. They're shocked that a White House which doesn't even try to balance its checkbook would repeatedly propose to raise taxes. And more they're worried about the consequences of our debt and the President's reluctance to do anything about it. But even more upsetting to many Americans is the White House's repeated attempts to seem as if it's doing something about these things when it isn't. That's just what the President has sought to do in talking about the need to reform entitlements and lower the debt, but refusing to lift a finger to do either. And that's just what I fear he'll do again this afternoon in outlining his vision for tackling these problems without so much as presenting a single new idea or anything approaching a workable plan to get us there. The truth is, the President is only entering this debate at all because he can no longer ignore the growing bipartisan calls for action. If he were serious, he'd be talking about a detailed roadmap for action, not just grabbing headlines by announcing another speech. Of course, we can hope that the President presents more than just his vision for the future this afternoon. But those who've hoped for that from this President have been disappointed many times before. What we're really likely to get instead is a broad brush notion of what the President wants to see, a vision that includes calls for strengthening entitlement programs that few people would disagree with, but which will never come about absent presidential leadership, a partisan call for tax hikes on struggling job creators, and, I fear, a call for tax hikes on energy producers when gas prices are already creating heavy burdens for so many. No doubt we'll also get a fair share of finger-pointing and an attempt to cast Republicans in the worst possible light for actually laying out a serious plan to address the crisis we face while others merely talk about their vision. But we can still hope that the President leaves the scapegoating aside for a change and finally admits the obvious, that we can only solve these fiscal crises if we do so together. So either the President agrees today that Republicans have a point when it comes to the seriousness of our fiscal problems and admits that the old approach of pretending they don't exist won't work anymore, or those problems will become harder and harder to solve. Either he pretends that old programs, unlike everything else in life, don't need to adapt to survive, or he joins us in acknowledging those programs will no longer be there for the people who are counting on them if we don't take serious action right now. We need to keep our promises to seniors and to a rising generation of Americans, and we will. But we can no longer afford to make promises to younger workers that we all know we can't afford to keep. Look, if big government created jobs and opportunity, then we'd be in the middle of a boom right now. The experiment has failed, and that's why the national conversation has shifted from how much Democrats want to expand the scope of government to how much both parties should rein it in. The fiscal crisis we face won't be solved by freezing unsustainable government spending or raising taxes on the very small businesses we're counting on to create jobs, and the programs we cherish as Americans won't be preserved for the next generation through speeches alone. Americans don't want to hear the President's vision today. He's had 2 years to lay that out. They want to hear his plan. Americans don't want to hear the President criticize or distort the serious efforts of those in our party who want to solve our problems head-on. They want to hear a detailed counter-proposal of his own. And they don't want to hear that the price of gas at the pump is going to get even higher or that there are opportunities to find or create jobs will shrink. Now is not a time for mere speeches or political attacks. It's time for action. That's what the American people want from this President. That's what they're failing to get, and I hope that changes today. Madam President, I yield the floor.
Clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Akaka.
Without objection.
Madam President, I ask unanimous consent that the privilege of the floor be granted to Ian Koski of my staff for the duration of the day.
Without objection.
Thank you, Madam President. I rise today to mark National Volunteer Week and Delaware Volunteer Week. All week long throughout the nation and across our great state of Delaware, Americans and Delawareans will be engaged in volunteer service. Volunteer opportunities include helping the homeless, tending to the environment, mentoring children in schools, and working to keep our communities safer and stronger and free from fires and accidents and injuries, among many others. Here in the Senate, one can't talk about community service or national service or volunteerism without thanking and recognizing our colleague, Senator Barbara Mikulski from my neighboring state of Delaware. Senator Mikulski has been the Senate's leader on volunteerism for many, many years, most of them alongside the late Senator Ted Kennedy. And I'm proud to be working with her to fight to save our national service programs. When Delaware's tireless governor, Jack Markell, was sworn into office in 2009, he decided to forego the traditional governor's inaugural ball, and he, along with his wonderful wife, our First Lady, Carla Markell, instead organized a week of service projects across our state. Today, that week of service continues and has become a tremendous opportunity for nonprofit organizations, community service organizations across our state to connect with Delawareans excited about teaching our children the value of volunteerism, connecting with our neighbors, and helping improve and strengthen our community. I've long believed that those who engage in volunteerism and service to others, in fact, get more out of it than they put into it. And volunteerism, as you know, Madam President, is a fundamental part of what it means to be American. It is a great, some would say the greatest part of America and its cultural traditions. However, volunteerism need not be confined, of course, to my state or to this week. It is something from which every American can benefit at every stage in their lives. And in my view, one of the most effective volunteerism efforts in modern history is one with which I was first engaged when I was a resident briefly of your state, when I was working for the National I Have a Dream Foundation in New York City now many years ago. The National AmeriCorps program, a partnership between the federal government and local nonprofit communities, was launched with bipartisan support, initially an idea proposed by President Bush and then enacted by President Clinton. The AmeriCorps program is now one which has had tremendous and far-reaching impact over the last 17 years. It enables 75,000 Americans annually to serve via AmeriCorps with a very wide range of programs where the funding is raised and its focus is directed by state commissions of volunteers, community leaders who help identify the best and most appropriate and most effective partners for this federally funded program that is also matched one-to-one with dollars from the local community. So far, more than 60 million hours of community service annually has been provided by AmeriCorps members. Well, in Delaware, volunteerism has a long tradition and a great history, and the volunteer fire service is one of the strongest parts of that long and proud history of our state. There are more than 88 volunteer fire companies in our state. They provide the vast majority of fire suppression service for our communities. And they faced a real problem when I became county executive, a steady loss in membership. As working class families are under more and more pressure, more folks, both parents are working, they're under more stresses, more demands, it became more and more difficult for people to dedicate the time and the energy needed to be trained and to serve as volunteer firefighters, and in particular to deliver ambulance service, one of the most important aspects of our volunteer fire service. So in partnership with our Newcastle County Volunteer Firefighters Association and with the YMCA and with AmeriCorps, I worked tirelessly to launch a new AmeriCorps program called the Emergency Services Corps. The Emergency Services Corps helps recruit volunteer firefighters, conducts CPR and first aid training, and provides fire awareness training for school children all across our county. So far, they've recruited more than 220 new volunteer firefighters and logged more than 100,000 hours of service to our community in the 5 years since it was created as a partnership between all these different entities. I just thought, Madam President, I would draw attention to that one example today of the hundreds of AmeriCorps programs across our country that are a shining example, I think, of how the young people of this country, people at all ages across this country, bring their gifts, their talent, and their spirit to volunteering. In every generation of Americans, heeding the call to service has been the answer to our greatest challenges. And with so many out of work, suffering from hunger, or facing homelessness right here in our own country, I think it's critical that we all pitch in to help. It's an affirmation of our bonds of citizenship and our compassion for our fellow citizens. So I'd like to encourage everyone in my state to visit the Volunteer Delaware website to find service opportunities this week. I'm putting a link to it on my website at coons.senate.gov. And for those who happen to be outside of Delaware, I hope they will visit nationalservice.gov and participate in this National Volunteerism Week. I suggest the absence of a quorum, Madam President.
Clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Akaka.
As if in morning business.
Without objection. The Senate still is in morning business.
Madam President, the House of Representatives Paul Ryan Tea Party budget privatizes Medicare. Let me repeat that. Medicare, the program of medical care for senior citizens that our seniors have come to depend on. The House of Representatives Paul Ryan Tea Party budget privatizes Medicare. Now, this is not an empty threat. It's not this senator's or many other senators' political interpretation. The House Republican Budget Committee chairman's budget would end Medicare as we know it. It ends Medicare. It hands seniors' health care over to insurance companies. It would break a sacred contract between workers who paid into the system thinking it would be for them when they retired, but under this new scheme, senior citizens won't have a Medicare program anymore. They would have to pick an insurance plan, and a voucher would be given directly to the insurance company. Under the proposal, I'm not making this up, a voucher paid for by the federal government would be given not to the senior citizen to go shopping. It would be given to the insurance company that they chose. Medicare for senior citizens would be turned over to insurance companies. If this sounds incredible, it is. because under that plan, insurers would decide what doctors seniors get to see and what health benefits get covered. Now, why do I say that? Well, that's what an HMO is. An HMO is a health maintenance organization. That is an insurance company. They have a panel of doctors. They have a panel of hospitals. They determine what is in the coverage that a senior citizen gets. Contrast that to Medicare now. That Medicare fee-for-service, the senior citizen makes the choice of their doctor of what are the things that they look for in their total medical care, paid for because they are a senior citizen and are eligible to Medicare, of which they have been paying in all of their life through a Medicare tax. And so now this proposal is to privatize Medicare, take it out of being a government fee-for-service plan, and instead insert it into a privatized insurance company. Do senior citizens want to change their Medicare and turn it over to insurance companies? I don't think so. If insurance plans raise their cost, which we know they do, seniors then would have to pick up the bill. Seniors would have to pay more out of their pocket for this voucher program. And according to the Congressional Budget Office, out-of-pocket cost, this is according to CBO, the nonpartisan actuarial accounting organization. According to CBO, out-of-pocket cost would more than double for seniors. This voucher program proposed by the chairman of the Budget Committee in the House, Congressman Ryan, it isn't like Medicare Advantage. Medicare Advantage has been a great program for senior citizens, and in our state of Florida, we have more signed up for Medicare Advantage than any other state, because what it does, it provides benefits at low cost to senior citizens because the federal government directly negotiates with the insurance companies' plans. That's different from what Congressman Ryan and the Tea Party is proposing. So insurance companies under Medicare Advantage have to provide guaranteed health benefits at a low price that is negotiated. And you know, as a result of the new health care reform law, Medicare Advantage premiums have actually gone down. These are the premiums that are paid by senior citizens. So don't let folks confuse you between what is proposed by the budget chairman in the House and the existing Medicare Advantage program. The Ryan Tea Party budget leaves these decisions up to the insurance plan. In other words, insurance companies will be in charge of seniors' health care. I don't think that's what our senior citizens intend to have happen. The Tea Party wants to end Medicare. That's the bottom line. Yet the House budget does little, interestingly, little, if anything, to actually reduce the federal budget, which is what they say that budget is for, to reduce the federal budget. Well, look at it. The House Budget Chairman claims his budget includes $5.8 trillion in spending cuts. But when you look at it closer, we learn that this claim was an accounting gimmick. And we've seen these gimmicks over and over and over in budgeting in the federal government. For example, first we learned that his staff had made a $200 billion mathematical calculating error in calculating interest savings. And then second, we learned that $1.3 trillion of the savings is artificially derived from a misleading assumption that the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan would continue indefinitely. And third, and most importantly, of his savings, $4.2 trillion of the savings came from the spending cuts that fly out the back door in the form of tax cuts for millionaires. At the end of the day, those $5.8 trillion in spending cuts in their budget translates into less than $200 billion in real deficit reduction over those years, or less than 1% of the total debt held by the public. So the Congressman Ryan Tea Party budget does little to address the deficit while making every single senior citizen in this country get their health care from an insurance company. So that's why Senator Baucus, our chairman of the Finance Committee, and I have introduced a resolution. This Senate resolution calls on the Senate to oppose this radical voucher program. Medicare has been providing affordable health care for seniors and disabled Floridians and Americans for decades and decades. It is a very popular program with our seniors. Medicare should not be dismantled. It should not be turned over in a voucher program to insurance companies that will eliminate choices. It should not be turned over to insurance companies that will increase cost. And certainly, seniors' health care should not be turned over to insurance companies. Madam President, I yield the floor.
Calling of the